Well, welcome to you all. It's a shame we're still in this socially distanced area. However, welcome to everybody. I've got apologies from Mark, and I think that's all. Hope you've all had a chance to look at the minutes. Do we accept those minutes as they're set out? Can I have a proposer? Is there anybody to second those minutes?
Sorry, you can't. He can't because he wasn't at the last meeting.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry. You can't second them. Okay, and there's only me here, so I will have to second them myself. Okay, thank you. But you did get the minutes of the meeting, yeah. Okay. Is there anything on those minutes that people would like to just flag up or ask about? If you can put your, yeah.
I was just wondering if anything's happened with those cockerels, because it was a little bit of an upsetting thing. Does anybody know?
Yes, the cockerels were removed from site shortly after the meeting, and she informed me of that, and I've visited since. In fact, we visited last week as well. Sorry? To a new home, but it's still on this earth.
I'd like to ask about the notice boards, item 10. It was proposed that the allotment officer would look at cost-effective solutions for a notice board at the Elkin Coates allotment site, using the hut, perhaps.
Yeah, we've got a number of outer cases of notices from work with the bus shelters, which we were looking at installing on the Cone Horticultural Society shed at the bottom of the Elkin Coates allotment. I think the lengthman went up earlier on this week just to have a look to see the feasibility of it, and once we have access to the hut, we'll probably sort out installing that on site. It may not be sort of like front and centre as you enter the site, but it's at the entrance, and if people know it's there, I think it will be well used.
Thank you for that. I just wonder, Eugene, if you could just go through Microsoft Teams, which is number 12, and just update the committee as to what is on there.
Yes. Since for the last meeting, we put on a number of things on the Microsoft Teams side, which should be accessible to people with Cone Town Council accounts, as in councillors. I'm afraid it won't be as accessible to yourself, Bill. But on there, we've got a number of things which include some general information about allotment sites, really as a briefing for new councillors. We've also got plans of most, but not all, of the allotment sites. And more useful, perhaps, is the iAuditor assessment of each site as a result of the site visit. So basically, as you know, we do a number of site visits in the course of the year. Each site is supposed to get at least one visit. Some sites, if there's issues, will get more than one visit. We would generally do one general assessment of a site per year, which is done through iAuditor, and that produces a PDF document which really just details each plot and how it was rated at that time of inspection, and includes any pictures that were taken to confirm the condition of that plot at that time. That's done generally once a year if we've got time to do that. If there's particular issues, then we would do an individual plot assessment So for Alkin coats, I think there'd be a number of plots which might be an issue in terms of the cultivation. So there'd be separate inspections for just those 3 plots, which are used as a basis for sending the non-cultivation letters to the plot holders and evidence for any notices that might result as a result of that. So that those iAuditor inspections are listed for each plot. So each plot has a file, each allotment site has a file in which there are iAuditor inspections for those plots, which you would have access to and can view, so you can see what when the last inspection was and what the condition was at that time. It won't show you what action has been taken on it, because that would be personal information in relation to the plot holders, most likely on that. But it does give you that general information. If there are other items that councillors would like to see on the Microsoft Teams sites for the allotments, I'm happy to put them on, provided obviously it complies with our data protection policies.
Thank you, Eugene. I'm struggling to get obviously onto the site. So if you are, then you're not alone. And Nathan is going to help us out with that if you do need to get onto that site and just have a little bit of help with that. Yes, Brian.
I've not been on Teams for quite a while because I can't access it. Is it the IT provider or the support IT team that I can contact?
I think if we go through Nathan first and see whether he can get us back on, because I'm having the similar thing. It's just going to my Pendle account rather than to my town council one. So there's obviously issues there if you can't get on. I don't know whether, Pat, so we might need to have some sort of group workshop on that.
There's a difference between Teams and email, though. It sounds like you've got an email issue. I've got a Teams issue.
Yeah. If after the meeting, if you go through what the issue is it that the password's not recognised or something like that, then it might be that we need to get the password reset, in which case it is our IT company we need to contact. So it might be a different issue. So I'll see you at the end and see.
Because my email's okay, no problem with email, and password, no problem.
And perhaps you can look at mine as well.
Oh, when I sent my laptop in to be sorted when it was poorly, it came back with 2 years missing on it. And so I have 2 years of things missing on my laptop. So I've nothing at all to do with what you showed me. So I've got to start from scratch again because I've nothing about the council. I know I've been here 15 years, but it's you got me organised, didn't you? Yeah, well, I'm totally unorganised now because the council doesn't exist on my laptop.
No, not at all. I will arrange a time for you to come in, and it'll either be myself or Nathan. We'll get it all back up and running for you.
Thank you for that. Declaration of interest? Nobody? I don't think we've got anybody from the public. No. So we don't need to exclude anybody. Item 8, Allotment Awards. Have we got anything on that?
Yes, basically the Allotment Awards are concluded for this year, which was the photo competition. I obtained some vouchers from LBS Horticultural in Troden, and we did certificates for the prize winners, and those have all been issued now and gratefully received.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything about the allotment awards? We're not sure what we'll do next year. It all depends on the situation, obviously, with COVID. That's for another matter.
I think we should really try to get that to something like normal for next year, because it's not the same sending photographs, is it?
No.
Just not.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to do that. So hopefully we will be able to. Item 9, we've got a progress report about the water supplies at Alkincote, Basil Street and Sutherland Street.
Thank you. Yes, we have contacted a contractor who provides risk assessments for water supplies. Unfortunately, due to the school holidays and summer, they weren't able to do an inspection before this meeting. I have arranged for them to visit all 3 sites on Tuesday morning to get a better idea of what the issues are in relation to those. Basically, Alkincote, which is a mains water supply, but has a long run to the number of taps up the allotment site. Basil Street, again, a mains water supply, which has a short run to a tap on the site. And Sutherland Street, which is potentially the greater of the issues, which is a surface water fed stream, or surface water stream which feeds a tank, which is currently not in operation. Having discussed with the contractor about the possible issues, they have felt that because it's a surface water stream, there is likely to be bacteria within the surface water because it's travelling through the soil. So there may be a higher need to test and regulate that supply if it's reinstated. The other supplies were of less concern, provided there were insurances against siphoning back and other issues, and that they were tested regularly. They did seem to give the impression that for Basil Street and Alkincote, much of the work could possibly be done in-house, which would reduce our costs. But for Sutherland Street, the need for professional testing would mean that there's likely to be a cost. But we'll know more once they've done the assessment on Thursday of this week, and I will feed that back to the committee.
Any questions about that? Can I just ask if we get the report on Thursday, what will be the time of starting the work, or does it have to come back to the committee in order to agree whatever they decide?
I would say that it would probably need to come back to the committee because we're looking at a significant expense. And effectively, for Sutherland Street, you're talking about a different sort of supply. So there are quite a lot of issues which would need further discussion because the supply at Sutherland Street is not on Cornwall Town Council land. The work wouldn't be on Cornwall Town Council land. We'd need to sort out what the on-costs were and whether there is sufficient within the allotment committee budget to do that. Whether we need FES to approve such spending, I'm not quite sure.
Depending on what it is, depend on where it needs to go, because if it's a statutory requirement, the council has no choice but to sort it. However, because the water source is not on our land, it may be that it's a statutory requirement for the borough council to sort it. So until we find out the outcome, we can't say what the path that would need to be taken to sort it out.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions about the water? I know we were wanting to have it sorted very quickly, and we were thinking about having an emergency meeting about this issue, but obviously events has overridden that, with the company not being able to give any indication of costings up until now. So December looks like will be our next discussion on that. Okay. Broken Banks allotment hedging report, to consider a report on the purchase and planting of internal hedging on Broken Banks allotment site.
Right, I've done an assessment of the work required and outlined some costs for that, which we could present to the next meeting. The difficulty is that at present we don't actually have a policy on installing internal fencing or hedging on allotment sites. The Allotments Committee's responsibilities is primarily for providing boundary fencing, and therefore there's no provision for internal fencing within our existing policy. I think what probably needs to happen, if the committee is in agreement to it, is that we would have to develop and agree a policy on internal fencing, which would probably have to be approved by FES, because it would require a commitment of resources and also to determine whether or not it's an appropriate policy for the council to have.
Your actual tenancies say that it is the tenant's responsibility to maintain internal fences and hedging, and not that of the council. So it would actually be against your current tenancies to do that. So it would be something that needs further investigation. To a future meeting.
So are we still in agreement that it's a good idea to not have, have fencing, but really have hedging as the first choice?
No,
You're not?
I would prefer that we stayed as we are.
Okay.
Because when you look at the area you're talking about, it's not a big area, but everywhere else is. Everything else is bigger. If they get it done in one place, they'll expect it everywhere else, and we just cannot afford it. Because when we went down to look at it, I thought about it long and hard afterwards, and I just thought, this is far too expensive. And it's a very slow working thing, isn't it? You can put a fence up, it's that high. Well, it's as high as you make it, but you put something in that's that high, it takes years for it to be high enough, and they won't be the same people, probably not. I don't know, but I honestly think it's too expensive and takes too long to get where you want to be.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with our part.
Okay. And I know that Mark would like to have hedging. However, it's something that is not here. I'm not going to propose that we make a decision now, but perhaps it can go onto the next agenda, unless somebody does want to propose it.
Well, I think we should all be here.
Yes, I think, yeah, because there's so few of us, I feel that we should be here discussing it and deciding on whether we want the hedging for environmental reasons or we just want the fencing because it's quick and easy to do. Okay, so we'll defer that, and obviously we won't be doing any hedging this year because by our next meeting it'll really be too late to put in the hedging in December. I mean, it can go in, but it'll probably be
until March.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, but we'll see. Yeah. Okay. So that reduces your workload a little bit on that. Okay. Allotment security.
Yes, since the last meeting, we've had some improvements to the security on Basil Street. The Harris fencing has been installed against the lower edge, which hopefully will deter intruders climbing over the bottom fence. But as it's only been in for a week, it's probably too early to say whether or not it's going to be fully effective on that, and that they may still also get in from other areas. At the end of August, a number of allotments on the Alkincote sites were broken into, and plot holders managed to get hold of the plot holders affected to get them to re-secure sheds and stuff. In discussion with some of the plot holders, they suggested that it might be useful to have a trail camera or some sort of independent camera on the Alkincote site in particular. We've already purchased 2 of the small trail cameras, which are battery operated and are sensitive to movement, which we can use on plots. And I think Basil Street and Alkincote are probably the 2 prime candidates for that. Obviously, we'll have to do some notices for that, but in terms of the purpose for the council, for installing the cameras, it would be to deter or detect crime, which I think is a legitimate reason under the Data Protection Act. And obviously we would advise plot holders that those are in operation, and because they won't be covering, I don't think, individual plots, more of communal areas, I would hope that they'd be in favour of that. I think because of the size of Alkincotes and the frequency of use, it may be advisable to get an additional camera which is maybe solar powered, because the duration of that would be potentially longer and would mean that we wouldn't have to change the batteries as often. In terms of the footage, there is an implication, because if the footage has to be reviewed, then that takes staff resources to do that. It can only be reviewed by a member of staff or by the police, and that would be only on the production of a crime or incident number in those cases. So it won't be for any general consumption. It would be solely in relation to crimes which have been reported to the police and wouldn't be viewed in any other circumstances.
Thank you for that. Any comments about security?
How long do the batteries last on the cameras?
We're envisaging them lasting about 2 weeks, and I think for most places we would probably look to check on them every 2 weeks and recover, see what that they were still operational and stuff. With the solar powered cameras, it will last significantly longer, but it would be dependent on the size of the storage cars within the camera itself. But if no incidents are reported, it won't matter if previous recordings are over recorded on those, so that could be pretty much left until an incident's reported. The other ones, I think we're really looking just at temporary use for a period of maybe 2 weeks to a month, and then removing them, because I think unless you can show that there are instances of antisocial behaviour, it's an imposition on plot holders to have those cameras there.
Rechargeable batteries.
We did get rechargeable car batteries, yes.
At least you've thought about the checks. If you're doing solar, they'll be charged all the time, won't they?
Yes, they will, those will.
UV, any sort of light from natural does, so you can use solar panel during the winter months. This should be okay. You know, it also depends on your placement of them, because if you stick it in a tree, you're in shade, so it will have to be carefully considered, but yeah.
Yes, they are trail cameras, so they specifically designed for low light conditions. I'm not saying that the picture is going to be wonderful, because you're talking quite, you're not talking high technology, you're just talking basic information. But it could be used to identify if there is an issue and to support any action taken on that.
Thank you. Anybody?
I can only really say from my previous experience of working for Burnley Council that they did have a team that installed cameras in fly tipping areas, but again, only as a response to the number of incidents. If there was no incidences, then the cameras are removed.
Yeah, that's useful to know, actually. Okay, so allotment updates, number 12.
Yes, right. There's been a number of inspections undertaken on allotments, particularly Alkincoats, Broken Banks, Carry Lane, Montague Street, Sutherland Street and River Street specifically, some in response to concerns that had been raised, and the IOTA inspections for those, for most of them, are included on the team's website. As a result of those inspections, 5 notices of breaches of allotment conditions have been issued and several letters of failure to cultivate, and consequently 1 plot holder has handed back their plot, and that has since been relet. Since the expiry date on the notice, 2 of those original notices of failure to cultivate it, I would be looking at progressing further with notices to quit in the next 2 weeks because the desired improvements haven't taken place. So that's really the plot inspections and actions on failure to cultivate. We've had a number of allocations, including on Alkincoats, which has recently been allocated. There was a allocation of a plot on Highgarth, which was the new tenant has started work clearing the site at the end of August, but has recently made a request that the perimeter hedge is removed because it's taking quite a chunk out of their plot. They say it's taking about 4 feet, about a metre or so of cultivable area off their plot, which they're concerned about. They also stated that they'd had instances where there'd been unauthorised access to the allotment plot because people were able to get in on Sutherland Street at one of the corners. The rest of the allotment site is fenced with the mesh fencing, but there is just this one area which had previously had, this hedge had been located there for some time, but previously was a much taller hedge, which is probably why we didn't go all the way around.
Sorry, are you talking about Sutherland Street?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. No, I'm not.
I didn't think you were talking about Sutherland Street.
Yes, I've confused myself there.
Yeah.
No, this is Highgarth.
Yeah.
Yes, I apologise for that. Good. More people should ignore me. Yes, so this is the Highgarth allotment site. In terms of the council's policy, plot holders would need the council's consent to cut, prune or remove any hedging within the plot. Particularly the boundary fencing, as we've discussed earlier, is the council's responsibility, and this hedging forms part of the council's perimeter, basically. Whilst the plot holders has said that they're prepared to remove it and reinstate a similar fence as the council would at their costs, it still, as a matter of policy, is the council's hedge and part of that perimeter. So at this stage, unless the committee feels differently, I'm minded not to accept the request to remove the hedge.
What's the hedge made of?
Good question. It's like a box type plant. It's a yellowy. Sorry, it's a box type plant.
How do you know what it is, Naomi?
I haven't seen a picture, so I can't advise on it, unfortunately.
I'm just wondering how far the roots something tall that can be cut down and narrowed down, as long as the roots aren't going too far into the allotment, then that might be all right, but it doesn't need fencing as well.
Looking at the actual hedge, it's been there for a long time, so the roots are likely to be well established. To deter people crawling through the hedge, a lot of rubble has been placed at the base, and it's basically formed a sort of banking on which the hedge is on top. Yes, on Highgarth. So it would be a substantial job to remove it. I believe it's a fairly fast growing and quite prolific hedge, so it's quite healthy and vigorous.
It's a lovely hedge. I've been to see this hedge, and when I came round the corner, I thought it'd be criminal to move that hedge. It's beautiful. So, I mean, I would propose that we keep that hedge. Okay, she's having problems perhaps at the corner where she thinks that people are more likely to be able to get through. But I suggest one of these cameras to see whether that is a problem, which I personally would be surprised that it was.
In all the time I've been doing this, nobody's ever mentioned that people have gone through there. They've gone through between the garages, but never through the hedging. And that hedging has been there a lot of years. I can't remember it not being there.
Yeah.
So,
and I believe she has only just taken the plot, not long.
Yes, she's a new plot holder.
Yeah, so she knew that it was there when she took it on. So I would be in mind of refusing that request. Does anybody second that?
It's not an agenda item.
It's not on an agenda item, so we have to leave that till December. Okay, no. And it can go on the agenda.
Yes, right. There's been a vacancy on the Georgia 5th site that had been offered a number of times to different plot holders who'd taken it and not actually managed to do work. I did discuss with the current person who's looking at taking it whether or not to split the site, but they were quite adamant and keen to take the site as it was, and they're due in on Monday to sign for that particular allotment. The last remaining plot on Basil Street was signed for last week. We have 2 plots on Sutherland Street, one of which has already signed up and has started work. The second plot has been offered, and whilst the plot holder was originally in agreement to taking the plot and was due in to sign up, they are concerned about the water supply, and they've asked for a little more time to consider that, and they're due to give me a final decision on Friday. Carrie Lane, we had one vacancy, which was heavily overgrown, and we discussed that, I think, at the last meeting, splitting that into several different plots. I've cleared part of that site in preparation for it to be offered, and offered it to 2 people on the waiting list. I'm waiting for them to come back to me on that, but even given the work, because Carrie Lane is in quite high demand, I'm not envisaging that there would be much of a problem in allocating that. So there's been quite a number of vacancies since our last meeting, most of which have been progressed or are nearing completion for new plot holders. In relation to South Valley and Notts Lane, the transfer documents have been received from Pendle Borough Council and have been signed by Colne Town Council and sent back to Pendle Borough Council in preparation for the completion of that land transfer. That was done separately to the rest of the allotments sites to ensure it was done as quickly as possible. So we're hopeful that that will be progressed quite shortly, given that all the legal documents are now in place with Pendle for the completion of and the transfer. And once that's completed, we can progress with the land purchase or potential land purchase of the access route to that site. Because we're coming to the end of September, it's usual time of year that we send out the plot fees for the next allotment year, which should be going out in about 2 weeks' time. I've already made preparation of the database. I've just got to finalise the letter and the invoice for that. We're hopeful this time that we will have a card machine in place at the town hall, so we'll be able to pay. We got it, and so we will be able to take card transfers, bank transfers, in addition to cash and cheques at the town hall, or alternatively by manual transfers, which they can do from their own phone if they wish to. So that's quite important and quite a significant amount of work, which will have to be completed within the next 2 weeks. Since our last meeting, we've had an invitation from Open Gate, an invite to an unveiling of a plaque by the National Garden Awards, who sponsored the dry storage container on site. They've asked members of the allotment committee, and I think they're also inviting members of local ward councillors to that unveiling, and that's on Wednesday, the 22nd of September. If people could confirm if they will be attending, I can confirm with Open Gate so that they have an idea of numbers. It's a Wednesday. Yes, it is, yeah.
Can anybody confirm that now to Eugene, that they'll be going? So Bill?
I thought I'd already confirmed.
Yeah.
And
I've confirmed, yes.
Can I just go back to what Eugene said earlier about the inspections? You mentioned Montague Street. Did you find any issues on Montague Street allotments?
Yes, is the short answer. And it comes under really failure to cultivate. We have issued letters previously, so we were looking at progressing that in the near future, rather than going into the details of it. There are issues, and they will be addressed very shortly.
And off Langroyd Road, I forget the name of the street, which is more or less opposite the laundrette, where there's allotments there.
Are you talking behind the laundrette? That would be the Highgarth allotments.
Eugene, you were saying that one lady had a breach of contract previously, and now she's got another one after tidying up the allotment, and now she's got another one. How many do we keep on giving, or is that not part of the policy at all? Is it if they get a letter and they tidy it up, then that's fine, they've got a chance to get another one, and you know the cycle I'm thinking?
It really depends on the interval between the letters, really. If you receive a letter 1 year, and whilst that's a record that you'd failed to cultivate at a time in that year, if that hadn't been progressed with the notice, the presumption would be that it had been inspected and it would comply, or they would have received either another letter or they'd received a notice. It partly depends on what their personal circumstances are, whether they've had an injury or whether there's other family commitments which has resulted in the failure to cultivate. So all that is taken into account in determining whether further action is needed, and that is something that I would generally take a view on myself, and if needed, I would either speak with the town clerk or the chair of the allotments committee in relation to that. If someone had progressed from having a letter to receiving a notice of failure to cultivate, which is the legal notice, in which they've got 1 month in which to resolve the issue, I would normally write to them at the end of that month to say whether or not they had or they hadn't complied with the failure, that notice of failure to cultivate or the breach of allotment conditions, and then give them the opportunity to either hand back the property, the plot, or progress it further to a notice to quit, which 2 of them are at that stage. There's some with existing notices of failure to cultivate who are still within their time limit, so that they've still got time within the original notice in which to comply, after which they'll be assessed and further action will be taken if necessary from that. But you're right in the sense that there does seem to be quite a lot of plots which go through a cycle of not being cultivated, getting lettings, doing something, and then not being cultivated the next year. I think it's difficult. Partly it can be a result of family or personal circumstances, partly a result of people not actually wanting or being resistant to giving back the plots, even though they do have difficulties in coping with them.
It's done on a case-by-case basis.
Using it the way we're supposed to do, breaking the contract. So, is it not?
That's what the legal notice to quit is. So that is the council saying.
One letter, do it again, another letter, and then the legal notice
However,
to quit.
depends on the circumstances. Each case has to be judged on.
Yeah.
So, but in essence, yes.
Yeah.
I think really what we need to establish in cases where we're serving a notice to quit particularly is that we've done everything we can to ensure that we've given the plot holder the opportunity to deal with the issue. And because we have a record of the letters, we have a record of the photos at the time of inspection. I think it would be difficult to say if we got to the notice stage that we hadn't done everything we possibly could. Unfortunately, the reverse side of that is that it does perhaps take longer than people would wish to get to the notice to quit stage.
Can I ask a legal question about about the land transfer? With Pendle, I believe that we're still waiting on that. Is there any movement whatsoever?
In regards to the transfers, the sites previously mentioned have been done.
Yeah.
I am waiting to hear back. I contacted the legal team again at Pendle last week to say, thank you for those documents. Now where's the other ones? Because that's the only thing you can really ask. And I'm just waiting to hear back. If I don't hear by the end of this week, I will be contacting them again and trying to progress them forward. I've been working on this about every 2 weeks. They've been getting encouraged. So I am aware that they are very swamped out. However, that's not an excuse, and we would really like this sorted by the end of the prior to the end of the financial year. So I have also spoken previously to Philip. So if I don't hear anything more, again, I will push it through.
Brilliant.
The best I can anyway.
Yeah, it's been going on for years. So yeah, another few months.
Bill's waving at you.
Yes.
Can I ask how many there are still on the waiting list?
Eugene?
You can, but I couldn't give you a precise figure. I think. I mean, we have done a number of allocations since our last meeting, so I know we've probably only had about 4 new applications, so we're probably slightly down on the allocations. Sorry, on the waiting list, but not significantly so. There isn't a site that you could say there's no applicants for, and there isn't a site that you could say that there was no applicants living in Cone for, definitely. So we still have a long way to go before we exhaust the list, and I would say it is pretty much static in terms of number of people coming on, number of people we're able to accommodate. Yeah, I mean, It would be about the same. I can do you a report for the next meeting, or I can circulate those figures before the next meeting if you'd like.
Okay, anybody else on that? Right, so we're up to items for a future month's agenda. So the hedging, yeah. I'd like item 10 to go on there again, and perhaps forward a written report about the pros and cons about the allotment hedging. Yeah, is that all right?
Yes, I think it would be useful to perhaps have some feedback from committee members as to what they want the policy to actually cover, so that we're not writing it in the dark.
Sorry, Maine.
Yes.
At the moment, it's not a policy change or anything. It's whether they want to try and progress with hedging or not. So they need to know all the costings and everything, see whether it's even viable. Because there's no point trying to write a policy if the actual project isn't viable within your budget.
And could we have the writing of the policy on the agenda for next December, so that we can discuss it if we want to? Because otherwise we'll have to move it onto the next agenda. So
He'll get it to the next available agenda. It depends if he can get it done within the time constraints. At the moment, he's working on the park as well.
yeah, so if that can go on the agenda,
A
and then
future agenda.
yeah, if it can go on to the next agenda, that'd be brilliant. Okay. Oh, and also I've noticed that there's quite a lot of people that are talking about overhanging trees, hedging, and not being able to cultivate on those pieces of ground. I just wondered whether we could think about a policy about wildlife provision, because at the moment our allotments are really for growing vegetables, fruit. However, in today's society, whereby we think about environmental concerns, perhaps we could have a discussion about that as well.
Can I just comment on that one? There is actually a legal definition of the usage of allotment sites that is in our tenancy, and we must stick to that, because that is a legal requirement of allotment gardens. So before you look at anything like that, I would request that you advise your officer to investigate the legal definition.
Yeah, could that go on?
Can I also comment on that?
Yeah.
On Temple Street, the 3 plots facing into the back street have quite a severe drop from the gardens down onto the footpath, where it's all nicely fenced off now, thanks to everybody concerned. I've got a hedge on mine, and they use that as a boundary for the chickens. I can't grow on that bit, so the chickens use it.
Yeah.
Previous tenants on plot 1 and 2 have also used the very big drop for the chickens, and the rest of the plots are cultivated.
So I think that's something that we perhaps need to discuss.
Looking at the land to see whether it can be used.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going in and saying you've got to have, 75% of your land cultivated. If you can't use a lot of the land, it's not really fair, is it? So I think that's a discussion that we could have. Yeah.
Can I just say, you're wanting hedging put in, but people are wanting it taken out.
That's
What's
that.
If you can't cultivate on 75% of a land, surely we shouldn't be using it as an allotment.
That's correct.
Okay, so that can go. Yeah.
I like chickens.
Unfortunately, we found a dead chicken.
They die, they do die.
In a shed. We went to investigate a problem that was going on a site with one of the allotment holders saying that the allotment hadn't been looked at, and there were chickens that hadn't been looked at. And unfortunately, when we did go down there, there was a dead one in one of the sheds. So, yeah, it could well have had a heart attack.
We used to get chickens and occasionally we found a dead one. We went down to 2-3 times a day.
Okay, so nothing else for the next agenda? Right, so date and time of the next meeting. And that's for the 14th of December, 2021, 6:30. That was nice and quick.